There we go. We're live. Perfect. So hello and welcome to the live series Roundtable events. Virtually for now, of course. One day we will be back in person, but we're keeping it virtual for now. And actually, massive warm welcome because this is the very first installment for all our Austin tech leaders. So essentially, you're all the founders of the Austin leadership community. So thank you for joining me today. How's everything going in Austin for everyone? What's the weather like at the moment?
Today is much better.
Yeah?
Yesterday was 100 degrees.
Oh, really? Well, has it cooled down a bit or got hotter?
Cooled down by 25 degrees.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. It has.
Yeah. I get that a lot. A lot of people say it's a bit too hot. It's a bit too cold where I am at the moment. So I'm actually looking forward to the heat, but I'm hoping I don't regret it when I get over there.
Be careful of what you wish for.
Yeah. I know I'll be complaining as soon as I get there. So, but perfect. Thank you for all joining me today. I wanted to firstly kick off with some introductions. Again, I'm not too sure whether you've had an opportunity to meet each other previously or connect via LinkedIn. So I thought we'd kick off with a few introductions so we can all introduce ourselves. So first and foremost, Sabeen Syed, you are the Senior Director over at HashiCorp, who actually went public in November last year, I believe.
Yeah.
I actually noticed that, well, today actually, that you made it to one of the advertising boards on Times Square. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
We had a whole presentation that went up on at Times Square.
Yeah.
When companies go public, I think that's kind of standard that a lot of companies do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun.
And you made the board. What an achievement.
Yeah, that's right.
I hope one day I'm as lucky. But yeah, it would be great if you could just quickly introduce yourself, Sabeen, in terms of your position over at HashiCorp, and I guess the team that you are responsible for and how they've scaled over the past 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. So I am an engineering director at HashiCorp. I work on the product called Console. I've been on Console for a little bit over 2 years now. I am basically the director over the Console ecosystem, and I've grown the team. When I started, we were 5 folks, and now we're over 20 for sure, like hitting on the 30, and then we're aiming to double in the next, like by the end of the year, and then and over next. So just a lot of growth, and the whole interviewing process that we're going to talk about today, that's something that has evolved, and I've seen that evolution and been part of that evolution for Console and HashiCorp as we've grown. So yeah, I'm super excited about digging into that.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much. And if you're doubling in size this year, hopefully you can take a lot away from what we all share today, and maybe implement a few new things if you haven't already perfected the interview process already.
Oh yeah, it's never perfect. I feel like the interview process is always evolving. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Perfect. Well, yeah, thank you for joining us. Next up, we've got Jonathan Zaleski, the current Director of Engineering for ibble. ibble, I understand, are a young organization building a playground for creators. Interesting concept. Yeah, perfect. Jonathan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. And since we actually originally talked, it actually became VP of Engineering. So
really?
it's been a growth.
Congratulations.
So thank you so much. And yeah, about myself. So I've been with ibble for just about 6 months at this point. It is an asynchronous communication platform, social network. We've sort of dabbled in the event space as well as experts on the platform doing Q&A sessions, as well as your more traditional social network sort of mediums, generally aiming for not vanity, but as with every social network that occurs. So pretty early. The company itself is still seed round, so we're very early. Located down in the center of Austin, specifically at the end of 6th Street, to be honest. And it's been great. So I've lived down here in Texas for about 2 years, have a track record of director, senior director, both for R&D firms as well as others. And probably an interesting fact about myself is at this level, I'm still one of the top committers on the code bases, and have really kept that for a long time. So still really deep in the tech as well as all the people stuff. So really excited to talk with this group. You're all representing, to some degree, companies that I've worked with previously. So I'm really excited to share our thoughts.
Perfect. Welcome as well. And yeah, you get the best of both worlds, still involved with the code base, but leadership as well, which is great. And you base end of 6th Street, did you say? Is 6th Street the street in Austin full of bars and everything like that? I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, to give a little bit more information, and I completely skipped some of the metrics that Sabeen had mentioned, but yeah, we're right above Voodoo Donuts, which is right across from this hotel called the Driscoll in downtown. So really great space. When I came in, we were about 10 engineers. So just to pivot back to that, we've grown to about 20 since I've been here in the last 6 months. Get into more details of that later on, but it could be as much as 100, depending on if we really hit our stride.
Perfect. Sounds great. Well, great to have you on board. Next up is Carl Shawless, ex-Verbo, ex-Expedia, and now the recent addition to the ranks over at ZenBusiness, who I saw had managed to secure Series C funding at the value of $200 million towards the end of last year. I think probably their biggest win, though, was getting you on board, Carl. Wouldn't you agree?
Thank you for that. I don't know. Jury's still out. So
yeah.
But thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I was at 12 years at HomeAway Expedia, so a large portion of my hiring experience is in that world. Here at ZenBusiness, I am now in charge of operational excellence. To boil that down it's continuous improvement for everyone, right? Where can we get better? Most of my focus right now is on engineering. ZenBusiness is a new emerging company, and I think from Expedia, where we had 5,000 engineers, I'm now working with approximately 200. So it's a big change, but the challenges of hiring are still the same, and I look forward to learning from you experts on your experiences around hiring and getting the best people for your company. Perfect.
Well, welcome and good to have you on board as well. And then finally, Arik Yelovitch, ex-Credit Karma, ex-Hippo Insurance, which I can see you're actually still repping the T-shirt for.
Yeah, my closet is full of swags.
Yeah, perfect. But yeah, it's a pleasure to having you on board today. I know you've been away over the past week, so thank you for jumping on this roundtable this evening. How are you today?
All good. Yeah, my closet, my wife's trying to throw them away. Sweats keep coming in. So, and Hippo, since I joined very early, I have, like all the generations of swags that occur. Yeah, so thank you for inviting me. And yeah, I'm ex-Hippo, ex-Credit Karma. I also joined as Director of Engineering in Updater, which is a small company based in New York. But I'm in the transition of hopefully, when this go live, maybe becoming CTO of a startup, because I do like the startup scene. So going back to my origins in a sense, and still the jury are out, but I'm kind of taking the time to decide, because I really want to grow organizations again. I think it's fun, both the technology and of course people, which is super interesting in that process. And I think one of the things we're going to probably talk about is how do you do it in a remote environment, right? This changed everything upside down, and to better or worse, depends on through the eyes of the beholder. So yeah, super excited to learn from all of you guys. And since we're all in Austin, would love to, I've been here half a year, so I would love to get acquainted and get to my network.
Yeah.
Stuff. Thank you.
Perfect. How's your half a year in Austin been so far?
It was awesome. I love Austin.
Yeah. Have you ventured down 6th Street yet?
Actually, Hippo's office, one of them is on 6th Street in Congress.
Really, right.
So I'm very familiar with this area, but I live outside of Austin, which I even like more, and visiting Austin occasionally for the food scene.
Yeah, perfect. Well, welcome all, and thank you for those introductions. So I thought let's kick off with, I'll just briefly go over the topic again. It's one I'm pretty excited about, to be fair, because over the past 6 to 12 months, I've been speaking to a lot of senior leaders within the industry. And a question I always ask them is, is your interview process at the moment effective enough, adaptive enough, and dynamic enough for today's market? Because we're in a position at the moment where we have come off the back of a global pandemic. It's completely turned the market upside down. And there's a lot of differences. There's obviously some very big ones like remote working, which has obviously had plenty of roundtables and discussions in the past about that. So we won't go into too much depth around that. We've got salary hikes at their all-time high at the moment, which is also proven to be a very, very challenging problem to overcome. So I guess there's no magic answer to what is the right interview process, and there needs to be it needs to be adaptive enough to cater for different skill sets and different seniority levels. But I'm always intrigued to find out what other people think. So I guess a question that I just want to throw out to everyone, and we can go around. We'll start with you, Sabeen. How have you seen the market change in the past 6 to 12 months, maybe just in general, and when it comes to hiring yourself?
Yeah, so just in general, I think what you have mentioned, the salary hikes are certainly a thing, and something that I've definitely seen change. And then I've just seen, like, there's so many companies that are hiring, and so there's so many choices on the table. And I've also seen, though, where candidates are more interested in not just the compensation, but we have more in-depth conversations around the culture of the company and the importance of that and the impact of that. And then also the growth, their career growth that they're wanting to have and to see, and then the team that they're going to be working with. And so those conversations are something that I've seen I have actually on a regular basis. And so it's kind of a little bit of the norm almost, where even after a debrief, we'll have another conversation with our candidates, just specifically like digging into these topics for them. So yeah, that's what I've seen recently.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like career growth and progression is something a lot of candidates look for nowadays. I think it may be kind of down to the fact that because the salary hike has gone up so much, they probably know they're going to be able to secure a good salary. So what comes next? Is it career growth? Is it the opportunity to work with new technologies? Is it the culture of the company in the engineering department? So yeah, they're things I've heard as well. What about you, Jonathan? What have you experienced over the past 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so I think I would riff on that a little bit more. And it's been longer. And I think, to echo though, I think communication is key, has kind of just been like a resounding kind of keystone thing for both procurement, if you will, from like hiring to both retention, et cetera, because it is still very much to this day, again, for the same reasons as the salary hikes, I would say a candidate's market, if you will, for sure. And we've actually had a lot of folks that, I came into the company only 6 months ago, so I guess I'm a great case study of this. And the original mandate from the company was, well, we want everybody in the office all the time. And we want to grow the team to 100 people in the Austin, like the downtown Austin office, hiring people from the Austin area and like extension area. And I said, well, give this 6 months and there is no chance that this is going to be the case. Prior to that, at least the last company I was at, Applause, we, like everybody, had to adapt to the changing world. And I don't want to, talk about the C word or anything in all of this, to be funny for a second. But certainly we definitely had to adapt. And I think, we struggled through it. We're on the other side of it. People have generally realized that they can work from anywhere. And some people really like that. So, we've had a couple of early departures from other departments here that are folks that just really wanted to work full time because they didn't jive with that. And, just as it relates to engineering, what I'll say now is I have a staff aug firm as well as some hybrid work scenarios here. And for the most part, there's been multiple weeks, especially during South by Southwest, which was recently, where nobody even bothered coming downtown because it's just more convenient. I live relatively close and I have a car that drives itself, which is nice. But if I can avoid the 2 hours of going in and out of the city, it's nice to not do that. So I think, yeah, the expectations are a bit higher. And even despite the fact that, you know, if you have either a hybrid in a co-working space or even like a full building or even completely remote, the salary expectations are the same. But there's like the company's technically saving a lot of money, so it becomes easy to justify. So, you know, without completely draining everything, I think it's changed pretty dramatically and it continues to evolve. And the pool is, you know, very wide now because a lot more companies I find are very much open to the remote work concept in general.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that there's so many companies now that, well, I speak to new companies day in, day out, and they're either looking to go fully remote, like that's across states as well, or they're looking to go on a hybrid model. But from a candidate's perspective as well, what I'd notice is obviously for the past 2 years, everyone's like, right, fully remote, I won't consider anything less. But over the past like 2-3 months, probably, I've spoken to several engineers that are now probably going the other way and saying, I do want to get back into the office, even if it's like once a quarter or once or twice a month. So it's kind of almost shifting back the other way. I don't know how far that will go, because I still think every engineer nowadays are going to prefer to work fully remote or 90% remote, which is completely understandable. You can get the work done still. Some people get it done better in their own environment. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how potentially it could be shifting back the other way as well.
It's really like and I'll quote my former CEO boss from the last company. You know, it's just different grass is what it comes down to. It's like the grass is always greener is the analogy. And I think it's very, like with most things, very cyclical. You know, I can say that I have a few young kids as well. I mean, they're in school during the day now, but to go back and like, how the heck did I do this for a year and a half? Like, I just grew numb to the fact that they were running around, screaming at each other, like going around the house and all that sort of thing. But yeah, anyways, it's a very interesting thing. And I guess the last bit, because I think this is still an interesting topic and hopefully a setup for the next respondent, is, you know, speed has just mattered all the more in the hiring pattern. Hiring process rather, because, you know, most engineers have 1, 2, 3, 5 offers in their hands, and you have a very small window to close them for yourself.
Exactly. And we will jump onto that. I've got an interesting point I want to speak about is we will get onto it, but it's more around like having to try and move as quick as possible, but making sure you're not making a rash decision. And like I've spoken to a lot of companies and clients over the past 6 to 12 months who have admittedly said they've made a rush decision rather than the right decision. So yeah, we will come on to that, which is great. Carl, what about you? What changes have you seen in the market and what challenges have been presented?
Well, I certainly echo what the colleagues have already said, but an interesting thing that I've seen over the past years is because people have choice, talent has choice, they're really focused on learning the next new tech, just constantly learning new things, having autonomy to learn new things. And that's been a common thread that I've seen over the past year or so. And so if they're given that opportunity, they accelerate in their jobs. And as leaders, we need to make sure they have that opportunity.
No, of course. And I think, well, I speak to candidates day in, day out, and a major reason is as to why they do look to move on is because they're not using the latest tech, or they're not being able to experiment with technologies that they either haven't used before but feel that could be a good fit for the project that they're working on. So yeah, no, I echo that as well. And Arik, how about you?
So again, echo what everybody else said, and I think jumping in a very elaborated answer. Just 2 points about that. So I think regarding the salaries and compensation, I think it's becoming more and more mercenaries market. Unfortunately, you see a lot of people asking way above their level justification. And since it's such a competitive, companies tend to sometimes pay that and regret about it later because they misleveling versus compensation. So it is happening because we are stressed for talent. And another thing that never happened before, and it's not 12 months, it's 24 months, with the C word, is that remote work was never a factor when you hired someone. It was like common thing. You come into the office, you might work one day, you might be, sick and work from home, but coming to the office wasn't a thing. While it's becoming more and more of a thing, as you mentioned, Jonathan. Why would I commute 2 hours? It's 2 hours that nobody pays me for, theoretically.
Yeah.
But the downside of not coming to the office is the boundaries between personal life and work. Because when you drive or when you commute, there's unofficial boundary there. I'm commuting home, although all of us work from home, like it's nothing new. But still, you are going home. So you're not available for half an hour. You can listen to an audiobook, you can hear music. And when you're at home, and it just suddenly becomes dark, and here it's becoming dark at 8:30 p.m. And then you realize, oh, I'm still working, and the kids came from school, and everybody's here, but still you're working in your office, in your home office, whatever. So boundaries, and this is why I really recommend virtual commute. Go for a walk in the morning, go for a walk in the evening. Just make a clear cut from work to personal.
Yeah. No, that's I think that's a great idea, and I know a good few companies have actually encouraged that. I think even like throughout the day as well, if you have like a virtual meeting that you can do on like a walk, maybe it's just good to get out and just split up your day. Otherwise, what you do find is that you just sat in all day, and then, like you said, you wake up, you go to work in the next room. You sat in all day, you go to the kitchen for lunch, finish your day, you go back into your bedroom. So there's no rest for it. But
I had people that actually asked me, do you expect me to work a specific hour? Especially now, last point with the time zones. We have people from the West Coast and we have people from the East Coast. Again, usually it was the satellite offices and the main office.
Yeah.
So the satellite office is kind of aligned with the main one. Now there isn't most companies don't have this term. So when do people expect to start work? Candidates ask it frequently, especially from the coastal areas.
No, absolutely. And one thing you said there, Arik, and that's been mentioned a couple of times, obviously the salary hikes have just gone through the roof. Companies either are trying to match them and trying to be as competitive as to what they've gone up to try and secure the best talent. Whether they regret it in the long run, I don't know. Some will, some won't. But if you can't go up to what they have hiked up to and say what your competitors are offering these candidates, how do you then, throughout the interview process, look to make the company and the opportunity look attractive? Is there certain touch points or certain things you do throughout an interview process that you've implemented maybe to almost win a candidate over, regardless of what the salary is as such?
Yeah, so I think it's potential versus immediate satisfaction in a sense, in compensation wise. If people want to pay way over what startups or round A, round B, round C, even very early public stage companies, then if they want now the base salary, they should probably go to the bigger companies, because there's almost no way we can align with that. With 300, 400 base salary, it's just not there. What the promise is, and this is where it comes into play with the with equity and everything, you sell them a promise, tell them you're part of a bigger thing. And this is exactly what the mercenaries versus the missionaries. If someone is a more missionary and they want to bet their 2 years success with the company, they really believe in it, then it's easier. There are people with mission. If they just come to make a quick buck and they are here now, then there's almost no way to win them over. On the other hand, it's a great filter as well, because you're looking for more missionaries than mercenaries in small companies. And so for better or worse, you do lose talent, but you might catch the right talent. In the end, will you just work harder?
Yeah, no, that's great. And what about, I'll come to you, Carl, because obviously you've come from a large organization in Expedia to a bit more of a smaller startup in ZenBusiness. How do you go about making yourselves as competitive and as attractive as possible in comparison to just salary alone?
Well, I think Sabeen nailed it earlier when you talk about culture, right? I mean, how do you work together? How do you collaborate? How do you build awesome software? So you have to sell that, of course. And then getting back to my point about learning, engineers today want to move around, right? So they don't They might want to be a back-end developer, and then they might want to learn front end. They might want to learn site reliability engineering, right? I mean, and so if you have a good culture and you listen to what they desire to do, and as you have openings and opportunities, you fill them with your own people, right? And so get them mobile within your organization. That was a huge trend at Expedia, right? We wanted to make sure the talent was doing things they loved. So.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And yeah, like I said earlier, I think it's so important that we, like candidates, understand what they can learn other than just going in and doing their, what is it, back-end engineering or front-end engineering work. Can they learn the DevOps side of things? Can they experiment with new technologies? Is that something you do at HashiCorp, Sabeen?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I found that has helped me is in my initial hiring screen, I ask them what's important to them and what's their next ideal role. What are they looking for? And I talk a little bit, and I also encourage, I talk about what is important to you, on the list, comp, learning, culture, team, career growth, what are those things? And that gives me a good gauge of what is important to them. And if comp is all the way up here, then I will definitely know okay, all right. And if they're interviewing with some of the bigger companies, that'll give me also a gauge okay, where this person's at. If there's other things, like the culture and the learning that were just mentioned, then that is, I can definitely speak to that. That's something that HashiCorp is, that's a strength of ours, and just making sure that they're informed about those things and projecting what the future can look like for them, so that they have a good idea of what they're getting into if they come to HashiCorp.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Sabeen?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you frequently, with some of the younger folks, do you run into struggles getting them to answer that question?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Junior folks definitely generally they will not have thought about it so much, and so
they don't know what they. Sorry to interrupt. They don't know what they want to be when they grow up. I find that most 3 to 5 years into a thing, it's you're thinking about an awful lot, and that can change dramatically. So it's a tough answer to pin somebody down on.
Absolutely, and I think it's good to help them walk them through it too. Right? It's not necessarily that they're, like you're saying, it's something that's going to evolve. And I think honestly, even as being relatively senior, it evolves for me too. In the next couple of years, I'm sure it's going to change. And I think that's totally fair. But it is just helpful to also for them to have, for them to go through that exercise and think about it a little bit, and just to have that conversation. So.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And so do you do the first screening for for everyone that's joining your team, Sabeen, or do you have people that maybe you trust to ask those questions and qualify those candidates at an early stage as well?
So whoever the hiring manager is, they'll do the hiring screen. We have a recruiter screen as well before, but this is something that all my managers who report to me, I'll ask them, to ask this question and kind of, get the points that they're looking for and make sure that they're touching on those. But yeah, whoever is going to report to me, I'll definitely do the screen for them.
Yeah. Okay. And Jonathan, how do you, obviously Ibble's a bit more of a smaller startup. You've obviously worked for larger corporations before, but how are you, or what strategies have you implemented within your interview process to make sure you're filtering out people that maybe are just solely looking for a higher base? Is that something you do at an early stage, or again, do you trust in other individuals within the company to do so?
Generally speaking, because we only recently brought in a director of people, in theory, that is an in-house function that would be front-loaded to that person. Most folks that we've worked with have been through independent recruiters or staff aug firms. So it's kind of it's a known quantity going in to a large extent. But to riff on something that Arik had said, as far as, during the process of interviewing itself, similar to Sabeen, all of my leads are involved in the interview process as well. I think it's very important to democratize that. It also, similar to like my overall message here, it helps start to build that relationship earlier, if that's potentially the team that they're going to be landing on as well. To echo what Arik said, potential versus immediate, I think at a startup, obviously, the potential can be a big part of it. Personally, I'm of the mindset of, I forget what kind of salsa it was, but like the why not both kind of thing is the way that I try to look at it. So, to that end, I'm letting all my secrets go here, but I do think it is a balance that does really matter. And I do really think starting to build that relationship as early as possible in the process is really one of the most important things. So I have, whether it was at Wayfair previously when I was running marketing engineering or transportation there, or Applause in between, or here now at a much smaller company, being very candorous, open, honest, direct, immediately starting the investment in the person goes a very long way. I mean, I've gone out of my way on many more than one occasion to say, I want you to put in I've said this during probably 100+ interviews at this point of, if this is to make sense and you are to come join company X, I want you to put in good work while you're at company X, and I want you to have a successful career. Like really bringing it down to that sort of human level and like bridging the company presence with that really does go a long way. And I mean, you have to be able to back it up as well. But, to that end, I've had a lot of success with that strategy.
Yeah. So just trying to keep it as authentic and as down to earth as possible, laying all your cards out on the table from the onset or the offset, sorry. And then, just making sure you're on the same page throughout the entire interview process, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think to this point, even before hiring managers, sometimes the first meeting, especially when you use agencies, and small companies use external agencies, which are, again, I'll go with it. They're mercenaries, right? They just want to bring volume. They try to explain what the company does, but they can't do a very good job at that because they're not part of the company. So I think regarding the first interview, which I think is, it's like, first time you meet someone and the first impression is super important, putting a manager there or even a director. A lot of times I took the first interview, not for screening. It's a bit more behavioral, but mostly marketing, right? You need to sell your company, especially in today's market, because you're competing with 7 other startups. There are no shortage of startups. Take every 4 letters and you have a startup with those 4 letters. So it's super important to do marketing. And I think once they also see a director coming to the meeting or a VP coming to the meeting, the first meeting after the agency, it makes an impression. It shows how important they are to the company. Thus, they're willing to invest as well, versus just I see, or not that it's important, but still, it matters.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that as well. And I'll hold my hands up. Like I work with a number of clients, but I don't work for the company, so I'm not going to be able to sell it as well as someone that actually works at the company. And this isn't like any disrespect to internal recruiters, but a lot of the time software engineers will want to speak to someone technical on a first stage interview. So having an engineering manager, having a director of engineering, just doing that initial informal screening, obviously you're going to have your guidelines as to what you want to cover with them and what you want to assess, but being able to give them a detailed introduction, not only into what the company are looking to achieve, the mission of the company, but also in a bit more depth around the technical projects that you're working on and the technology stack that you're working with. I think that goes a long way, because I've had it a number of times where potentially like the first stage of the interview will be with a talent acquisition specialist, and don't get me wrong, it's still great to have an introductory call with those people and meet those people later on down the line maybe, but I think as a first stage it needs to be someone technical to be able to run everyone through, or candidates through, the technical side of things as well as the business side of things as well. So yeah, I completely agree with that point. How about from a bit more of a technical assessment? I'll throw this out to whoever wants to take this first, because with how competitive the market is becoming, or has become, should I say, candidates, unfortunately, whether they're a better well, I'm not saying everyone's a better company than everyone else, but whether they do prefer maybe another company more than another, because they've got so many opportunities on the go, candidates unfortunately do prioritize companies that can get them through a process quicker, or companies that maybe don't require as much of a technical assessment from them. So I have a number of candidates that just withdraw from processes because, not a number, but I have candidates that withdraw because they've got to invest a lot of time into a technical challenge from home, or maybe they've got to do a very, very long on-site technical interview, which is 3-4 hours long, whereas they're coming up against other companies, which are maybe a quick hour-long technical assessment or a quick hour-long technical pair programming session. And unfortunately, they're losing out to those candidates because they are moving quicker. Like, what challenges have you found from a technical perspective when assessing candidates?
I can speak a little bit to that there. So I know, so that's like the kind of like the speed versus thoroughness that I think all companies are going through. I think it's really important to have a process where the thoroughness is also not compromised. To me, thoroughness is really important. I do want to make sure that folks that are joining the company are a good fit, because I feel like if you don't do that piece, then and you have somebody come in, then a little bit is kind of based on hope, and they might not be set up for success. So our process right now, we have an interview panel that consists of 4 different interviews. Each are 1 hour long. So it is a time investment. And out of those 4, 3 of them are technical interviews. And so there is, that process. The best thing that I found that helps is to let the candidate know, even in the rec that they're applying for, so that they know what they're getting into. Like, it's not something where it's kind of a surprise, or even like a conversation with a recruiter. So if at first, before they even apply, they're like, they're aware that they know that, this is the time investment. And this is also a conversation, like sometimes in the hiring screen, that I'll talk to folks and let them know, like, this is something that is, good for the company and also good for the people who will be joining the company, because we want to make sure we have that fit. And it's, something that will help the team and the product, move forward and reach the goals that we want to reach.
Yeah.
I fully agree with that. I mean, I definitely don't want to compromise thoroughness or quality in the process. So, previously, I've done actually a decent amount of staff aug recently, but to harken back a little bit further, I think the transparency about the upfront investment does really help. And, it actually can be spun as a little bit of a selling point at the end, because I'd say, like, from this conversation with me, 6 more hours commitment, to our process, and provided it all makes sense, like, you're done. So I've had the inverse of that. I mean, I've done interviews, I will say, at not what specific company in FANG, but like a particular company. They're all kind of the same. And I got, after spending a month and a half of my time, which was, kind of expected to be the run, I got well, you're overqualified for the original role, but you're not quite at the next level. So, well, thank you for your time. And I was just like, whoa. And I'm like, now I get those calls to talk to any of that cohort. I'm like, no way. So, like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what you both mentioned there is obviously setting the standards from the off. Then a candidate knows what they're entering, they know what to prepare for. And if at that point they're not prepared to invest that time, well, we're saving everyone time at the end of the day. So yeah. I think that's key.
And I think there's another aspect. We need to remember that it's not only the candidate choosing the company also chooses the candidate, right? And I like to give, I don't know if it's the best example, but I always give the candidate example of they wouldn't marry their spouse after 2 dates, often 2 hours long. So it takes more time. Unfortunately, we don't have a year to date with candidates because it's not how it works. But we want them to be sure that they want to join the company, right? Because we don't want them to have buyer's remorse. Join the company and go, hey, this is not what I signed up for, and leave after a month or 2 months, or even worse, half a year after you invested in them a lot. Because we all know the first 3 months, it's purely the company investing into the new employee, and you don't get any, you don't get anything from them. You start to collect, you start to reap the fruit after 3 months. So very important for them to be sure. So the more you can expose them, again, in a specific time, 3 hours, 4 hours, and if they not willing to put 4 hours or 3 hours, which is remote, you can divide it. It doesn't have to be come to New York, sit in our office and take your telephone. Still in their remote office or home, then maybe it's not what you're looking for. That's fine. That's another filter.
You've just ruined my Disney fantasy
about
how the process is supposed to be so romantic, and you fall in love with
it is romantic. It is romantic. Don't let me ruin it. In Austin, it's still romantic.
Good.
Brilliant. And what about you, Carl? Have you had any situations where maybe you've lost out on candidates, or even on the other side of the coin, have you had a situation where maybe you've rushed someone through a process or not thoroughly assessed them from a technical perspective and hasn't really turned out to be the right hire?
All of the above. What I think needs to happen is balance, right? I think Jonathan alluded to this, right? If you give someone a homework exercise, it's going to take them 3 business days, 48 hours plus to complete, they're not going to want to do it. And that happened to me personally. And I'm like, I'm not going to invest this amount of time if that's what you're asking here.
Sorry to interrupt, like even not at the right level. Like if I'm interviewing for a director level role and you ask me to go code a Ruby on Rails, like starter project, I'm going to feel a little bit insulted. But that being said, for tech forward companies, it is a good ego check, honestly, though. So like it's kind of a mixed bag, but sorry to interrupt.
No, you're spot on. And then the other aspect of this is, especially in the virtual world, some of the tooling to be able to do a technical interview virtually is lacking, right? Because you really want to assess their ability to be analytical thinkers and problem solvers. And the tools are there, but some of them are expensive. So as a startup, it's kind of hard to get a hold of those. So, but it's about balance, right? Can you have examples where a candidate can show their skills quickly, efficiently, and not take a week of their time to do so?
Yeah. Have you ever encountered a situation where maybe you've got a candidate that you really like, probably are very confident that you're going to make an offer, but you still want to put them through that technical assessment, whether that be from home or a long on-site, or even a short on-site, but they're not overly committed to doing that? How do you approach that? Do you have you ever made an exception, I suppose I'm asking, or are you quite stick to your guns, I'm sticking to the process?
For me, I don't think I've made an exception. We need to evaluate some level of technical expertise. Can we make it lighter per request? Sure. And can we put more principal engineers in the interview? Sure. So there are other tactics you can take to quickly assess technical capabilities, but I have not compromised. I'm sure everybody else on this panel has not either. So
you're right. But there's also the caveat of where this candidate came from, right? If it's completely anonymous, then it's probably certain. You won't compromise on anything, but if someone with reference and you know the person's staff engineer, reference another staff engineer, then you can probably compromise a bit still to the degree you feel confident in, right? But if you trust your staff engineer, it usually benefits if you a bit lighter on the technical in a sense. Again, to the extent you feel comfortable.
Have you had that experience as well then, Arik, where maybe you've had a good referral from someone that you know and trust?
Yeah, and I did the technical. We did the technical screen and everything, but we didn't give them the homework because we felt confident based on where he worked and the reference. And I don't think anybody likes to reference someone who we think might actually won't be to the expectation, right? Because it's our reputation. Yes, mistakes happen, but at some point it helps us to save money and effort on interviewing. That's why we're doing reference, right? That's why we're paying for reference, because it's supposed to save us some time and effort in the recruitment process. Also, it helps probably to do a better match.
Mm-hmm. No,
I think there's a pretty big difference between, like, I would agree, like in certain scenarios, definitely can fast track it, but there's a pretty big distinction between lowering the bar and just speeding up the process. Like if you still get all the outputs, then, you know, whether they come from a strongly qualified current or previous employee or something else, like those can all be thrown into the pot and like considered equally. So I would definitely agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect. I've also had occasions where communication hasn't probably been as fluid as it could be, and this is more, I don't know what it's like internally, but from like an agency perspective, I'll just chuck my thoughts on how it's sometimes communication isn't as fluid as what it potentially could be, which ends up in delays in getting candidates through the process, from whether that's like from first stage to a technical interview or technical interview to final stage. How do you ensure, whether that's internally with the team or whether that's with external agencies or even talent acquisition teams, how do you ensure communication is fluid to ensure that feedback's going out quickly, candidates are being progressed quickly? Do you maybe have like debriefs after every interview? Are they like part of the process, or is it just we all email in when we've got an opportunity? Jonathan, have you got any process around that?
Yeah. I mean, when I've done it, I've done similar to Sabeen with hiring committees effectively, and I've done that at various scaled companies, and that's worked fine. I mean, I generally, again, in the scheme of echoing back to 2 questions ago with the personal relationship, I make sure to, you know, to the extent that I can, again, in building that relationship, I always share direct contact information for all of the interviewing staff, if you will. Pretty early in the process, and you know, there is a structured process that will follow, but I always leave it open for, like, if you're ever wondering, whatever, like, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I think these days I've actually seen it go even further, of where, you know, whether it is a recruiter, whether it is an engineer or whatever, it's something along the lines of, you know, I really endorse you in this process. If you need any other help in the process, you know, here's my cell phone number, text me. Like I've seen that sort of thing start to come to fruition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would anyone go on, Sabeen? Sorry.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. And I think, Jonathan, earlier what you had said, like about investing in the candidate, I think that's all in line with that, and where we're, you know, going, I would say, what is kind of out of our way to make sure that, you know, their questions are answered, you know, they know the process, you know, they know what things look like, they know what life will be like, what if, you know, things go well with the interview and all of that. I know one of the things, Jordan, that you were asking also was just around like the communication. I think internally and like with the debrief and all of that, at HashiCorp, we do have debriefs like right after the interviews. And we haven't done this till yet, but like one of the things that we want to start are SLOs around, okay, right after the last interview for a candidate, you know, when does a debrief have to happen? You know, we want to be able to have like that quick turnaround, ideally like within 24 hours, you know, to the candidate. And so I will say it's not perfect till yet, but that's something that we, you know, that we want to get to. And we've even talked about like, so right now we have all debriefs are synchronous. So basically all of the interviews, all of the interviewers, we all get together, you know, talk about if we want to move forward or not. We've also considered doing like async debriefs at some point in time just to speed up the process.
Yeah.
I think that's really good. I mean, that's more or less like, it's really a matter of just who facilitates that. You know, at a bigger company, we had our internal recruiting firm pull together because we have like, you know, 20 interviews going on during the day, and we'd have hiring committee even for folks that didn't meet with people, be able to help with, you know, the debrief process. In this scheme of my last company, I mean, it was usually after the last interview wrapped, we got in a room, pulled in the recruiter. So typically I would say less than 10 or 15 minutes after, like, presumably you made it to the end, like all of my interview staff has always had the ability to effectively walk somebody out if things aren't going well. So if you've made it all the way to the end, it's probably a good leading indicator that at least a few of the people in the room want to hire you. Maybe the last guy or gal is not at that level. But, in the scheme of timeliness, I feel like you can drive that answer very quickly. It just really depends. The process around it is how many, what your concurrency is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Arik, have you got anything to add to that? Do you schedule in debriefing sessions after, or how do you go about ensuring communication is fluid?
So I use a lot of systems like Greenhouse and Lever, mainly Greenhouse. And the thing I found in debrief, and I love debriefing after interview because but since we are all remote and things, I found that sometimes debrief, and we can get it later, how do you actually take comments on the remote interview and how harder it is to read body language and you need to put different attention. But having a debrief before people gather the thoughts, I felt a lot of times is actually can influence, and like Jonathan said, 2 people like the person, 1 not, them talking how great this candidate are, and the last one says, you know what, I felt like, but, and they're not usually able to articulate what they liked or didn't like. So I found that putting it in writing, letting 24 hours and let the candidate know we're deciding over, but at the end of the day, or 5 hours after the last interview, everything is in the system, and then you debrief on what people wrote, but you actually have, they actually form their thoughts, which can bring us to another, when do you write the feedback, right? That's another aspect we can talk later. I don't want to double click on that. But that's how I usually work. And in small company where there's no supporting system, yes, usually just go to debrief, get it done, because you don't have this entire system.
Yeah, absolutely. And Carl, how about you? Have you implemented anything differently that helps you get, I suppose, the process to the end line and that candidate over the line?
Very similar process. One challenge or problem space that I saw at a very large company is that you have a candidate, they're interviewing for a specific team or role, and the rest of the teams that need that same talent don't know about that individual, and then they end up interviewing again for a different role. And so what has worked best in the past is when you do the interview, you're interviewing for the company or that level. You got a senior engineer. If everybody agrees that they're a senior engineer, then they get placed on whatever team is going to be best fit for them. But I've seen us lose talent because we were only interviewing for a specific team and not for a role. So that's a problem space. I like what Arik said about the debriefing process. Get it in writing, look for the patterns, look for the anti-patterns, and then have that really rigorous discussion specifically about the anti-patterns that surfaced. So yeah, it's a good process.
I like what you said there, Carl, about ensuring that I think that's a good way to approach recruitment in terms of making sure that you're interviewing candidates on the basis that they could be a good fit for the company rather than just a specific role. I've worked with companies in the past that have just been really focused on, we need this person for this specific position and project that we're working on at the moment. I've worked with a number of companies as well, a lot at the moment, that are actually going through a lot of hiring at this moment in time and throughout this year, probably the same as like HashiCorp and ZenBusiness as well. And they're actually looking at just meeting smart people, passionate people that can add value to the business, and then they almost tailor or create roles for them from there. And I think it's a really, really smart and mature way of approaching an interview process and recruitment.
I mean, certainly just it comes back to trust your interviewers. And just to be clear, from the earlier statement, it's really more to load balance that I have people at a certain seniority level interview certain candidates. Like generally you should be at or above the assessed level of whoever you're meeting with is like is the general idea. But I fully agree with the hire people that want to be there and hire to the role, and as opposed to a particular team. Because I mean, at least for me, everything is fungible. Like the team you're on when you were hired versus the team you're on when you decide to move on, or the team you're on 6 months from now, those can be completely different. Like I think it kind of starts to tie in with, how do you structure your teams? Are they project focused, product focused, and there's all
Mhm.
sorts of like way that you can go in that direction.
Mhm.
But I do think that, again, that's one of the other things like post interview that can really be good for retention, because like you're potentially moving around, keeping the talent, growing the talent, and so on and so forth.
Mhm. No, absolutely, and I 100% agree with that. I'm quite conscious of time, so I've got. I just wanted to, because me and Sabeen were talking when we initially caught up about, and to be fair, this subtopic could probably have an hour, 2 hours, a whole evening on its own, and that's DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And obviously, it's a topic that's spoken about a lot, rightly so as well, a topic that everyone needs to consider massively when recruiting. I just wanted to know how the pandemic and how today's market, has it made it more challenging to onboard or source underrepresented communities, or has it enabled underrepresented communities secure more jobs and land, and I suppose companies land more talent? I don't know, Sabeen, maybe if you want to kick off, how do you approach it, and has things changed over the past couple of years since the pandemic hit?
Yeah, so since the pandemic, I feel like there's been a number of factors. I think also the awareness has also increased.
Yeah.
So I can't really pinpoint like what had an effect on what, but I think probably pandemic, remote working as a result, and then just the awareness increase. I think that has had an impact. I know at HashiCorp, for us, it's mainly like around the pool of and the reach of our recs. So we want to make sure that our recs are put in front of, you know, a diverse pool. And that's something, to be honest, like we're continuously working towards and continuously working on to improve. We do have like numbers and such that percentages that we're trying to aim for. But yeah, that's something, I think it's an ongoing effort that will just continue.
Yeah. And I think it's good as well, going back to like remote working, that's obviously why if companies looking for fully remote engineers, it's widening the talent pool, and I think it has given more people more opportunities as well, which is another brilliant thing of remote working. So I think that's had a massive contribution. Has anyone else got anything to add to that about what they've maybe implemented or introduced over the past couple of years, or what changes they might have seen?
You stole my point. We went 100% remote, so
Yeah.
the market is much more open for us. So we can be a little more selective and diverse in what we do. So, yeah.
And I would say the same. Yeah, it's, if anything, I think you kind of answered your question while asking it, and I would say it was your question, Jordan, is that I think it's enabled a lot more to make a lot of things a lot easier in some regards. But again, you know, there's always a pro and a con, I guess, of all of it.
Absolutely. And how about you, Arik? Have you implemented anything into your interview processes or noticed any change of late?
I think the rest of it, like, I think as everybody said, remote opened the opportunity to people not only from the Bay Area or from major cities and major hubs participate, which is a plus. On the other hand, we also try to work with agencies of first few days, just give us DEI candidates and not again, but overall, you do not want to hurt your recruitment process, right?
Yeah.
You need to recruit people, but spending a few days just trying to get into the channel more diverse candidates for minorities or underrepresented groups, to the extent that it, as I said, doesn't hurt your pipeline.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I agree. I think, having that small buffer, maybe even releasing a role a little bit earlier to have a bit more of a focus, may be a good idea. But again, you don't want to interrupt or affect the recruitment process as well. So it is a challenging one, but as I said, it probably deserves a good hour or evening to discuss that on its own. Which, maybe in the next couple of months we can jump on that as well. I hope you've all got maybe just a couple more minutes. I've just got one question for each of you, and then I'll let you go. I appreciate how busy everyone is, and I'm conscious of time, but I'd love to keep talking more, but it has to end at some point. So one question I had, I appreciate every interview process is different. there's a huge amount of variables you have to consider: skill sets, seniority levels, positions that need filling, the right people for the company and the culture. But if you were to go into maybe a new organization, a couple of you obviously have, what 3 things would you consider when structuring a new interview process? Maybe we'll start with you, Carl. What have you maybe gone for, or what would you suggest if you had to suggest 3 things?
Oh boy.
Put on the spot.
The one thing that I would want to see is that the interviewing panel are a diverse set of people, so that we get an omniscient view of the candidate. So that would be important to me. I would love to have a very streamlined technical assessment. I do not want to see multiple hours of someone struggling at a keyboard trying to write some code that's just going to get thrown away. It makes no sense. Yeah, those are 2 things that I would want to make sure we're in the process.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
I would say.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Arik. You go ahead.
It's Jonathan.
Okay, I'll just do one. So, I think in coming into a relatively new company not too terribly long ago, I think figuring out the baseline also for your current staff. I mean, I came in, I had 15 engineers that I knew nothing about and nobody to really learn it from. So like getting that assessment and then reconciling that with, your levels and responsibilities document. If you don't have one, create one, and then kind of use that both to inform the level of candidates you're looking for, as well as who should be talking to who. In the scheme of it, it's always 2 things, or always 2 or more things, in at least my experience.
Perfect. No, that's brilliant. And Arik?
Yeah, I think in coming to a new company, first and foremost, we need to understand what works well and what doesn't work well, not revolutionize everything. And another thing that I learned is what works well is in technical interviews is eliminate the one-on-ones, and because of time and everything, and we're all subjective, have a panel, senior engineer, manager, more junior, so they can all incorporate in the conversation. 2 folds. 1, you can get more questions and more elaborated interview. And the second one, the candidate also feel who are the engineers in the company, right? Those in this previous point, we talked about them learning and understanding what the company is and who the people who work there.
Perfect. No, that's brilliant. And Sabeen, I will end with you.
Yeah, so I'll just really quick, I'll just tack on 2 things. Just building off of what Jonathan was saying, like, evaluating and what Arik was saying, evaluating what you have. The other thing that I like to do is evaluating where we want to be. So like in 6 months or 12 months, where do I see my team and my organization? What's the level of people? What are the people that I want to grow right now, and taking that into consideration, and then building a pool of like, okay, what are the candidates that we're looking for and the roles that we're looking for? And then the second thing is just like the principles. And I feel like that hiring for attitude, for communication, I think those learning, all the things that we've talked about, I think that's super important and something that I would definitely take with me wherever I go.
Perfect. So not just looking at what's needed now, but the long-term vision as well, and taking into consideration those attitudes and desire and passion for wanting to learn. No, 100% agree there. Right, I could go on for much longer. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate you all for taking the time to have this conversation with me. As I said, we will publish it on our YouTube channel, and I'll send you all the link after when it is published. And yeah, I'll keep you posted for future events. Like I said, this is the first one for Austin Tech Leaders. So thank you for being the founding members today. And I'll keep you posted for future events, and feel free to jump on any that come your way.
This is really fun.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much all for your time, and have a great day. It's pitch black here, so yeah.
Good night.
Enjoy the sunshine.
Nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you all.
Likewise.
Speak soon.
Bye.
Bye.